Hello and welcome to our Applied Health and Exercise Science group presentation. The target audience for our health and exercise intervention is aimed at a mixed gender group of Year 12 sixth form students. And the primary focus will be on increasing muscular strength, mass and endurance. This will be achieved by an annual macrocycle programme of gym-based learning within the format of an optional 1 hour after-school club within the school's gym. So in our max cycle, we will use a similar method to Newell et al., where he split the cycle into three different phases: the preparatory period, the competitive period, and the transitional period. And despite this program being labelled a macrocycle, it will actually be split into many different microcycles, as there is a lot more than going to the gym and just lifting weights. So there'll be many different classroom-based lessons learning about the required nutrition and training methods to encourage growth and the repair of muscles. So as you can see from Turner's periodization table on powerlifting here, this is a similar method that we would implement in our program. We have aimed the program specifically at 16 to 17-year-olds, as this is this age that they can start going to the gym independently. Intervention isn't to completely transform the students' bodies in the hour that they're with us each week. It's designed to give them the tools to go and implement the method away from school, both in the gym and in the kitchen, to achieve a whole lifetime of physically fit individuals. It is widely accepted that to increase muscle mass and strength, progressive overload is the key component within the gym, and this will be the first thing made clear to the students in a classroom-based preparation session as they begin the program. Kisner and Colby summarised that progressive overload can be achieved in many different ways, not just through constantly increasing the weight or resistance week by week. It can be achieved through greater intensity of workout. For example, doing higher reps with slightly lighter weights or having shorter rest periods between sets. According to Schoenfield, the primary process when muscle growth occurs is called hypertrophy. When your body is introduced to a weight that it hasn't dealt with or lifted before, the minute muscle fibres within your muscles will be forced to tear. And to ensure this doesn't happen again, the body will automatically make the fibres grow back slightly bigger. Unfortunately, though, for women, muscular hypertrophy is sometimes a lot harder to achieve due to the lack of the male hormone testosterone. However, it is still possible. It might be a little bit harder for them. So to summarise, this is the basics of how muscle growth works, because your body quickly becomes used to a specific stress placed on your muscles. It is really crucial to implement progressive overload, because if not, your muscles will simply not become stronger or grow. Moving on to our approach of using non-linear pedagogy and a constraints-led approach, Chow et al. States that non-linear pedagogy involves manipulating key task constraints on learners to facilitate the emergence of functional movement patterns and decision-making behaviours. So our intervention will take this approach to pedagogy because everyone will be at a different genetical start point with regards to strength in the gym. So they'll be given an element of freedom to choose through a constraints-led approach. On top of this, the goals of students might vary. So, for example, the female gym goers unfortunately reluctant to increase upper body size and strength due to their own fears of looking too masculine and sort of gender stereotypes. So their training program may be more tailored around increasing leg strength, for example, rather than the whole body. When young people first start lifting weights, as their body is going to be in an element of shock and still growing, it is possible that injury is going to occur. So some students will need to either regress and lower the weight or take some time off to help any injuries heal. As aforementioned, this max cycle will also have several classroom-based and non-practical lessons, because it's going to be key that the students know the basics of your compound lifts, like bench press, deadlifts and squats, as we could see in Turner's table earlier on. There will also be a lesson on injury prevention and how to implement an adequate warm-up into their sessions. And finally, from me, Malika 2012 recommends that 6 to 10 reps is the optimal rep range for muscle growth. So the students will be recommended to first establish what the heaviest weight they can lift is within this rep range.
As aforementioned, build muscle, it's imperative that the correct work in the gym is done. whether it be a progressive overload training program or not. However, for muscle mass to increase, in more states, you must consume more calories than you use, or in other words, in a calorie surplus. As shown on the screen, consuming more calories than you burn in a day represents a calorie surplus. The usefulness of this is emphasised by Arrigan's findings that when using resistance training in any program, although gains in muscle mass can be achieved in a hypercaloric state, maximise exercise-induced hypertrophy, an individual must be in a calorie surplus. Slater et al. Further backs the vitalness of the calorie surplus up, stating that there is clear evidence of an anabolic stimulus as a byproduct of the surplus, regardless of any resistance training. Understanding the importance of a calorie surplus is not enough, however, as Chu states that when we're in a calorie surplus, we gain both muscle and fat. With the aim of the training program being to build muscle mass, ideally, we want the extra calories the students consume to be turned into muscle rather than fat. Therefore, it's vital that the work is done in the classroom as well as in the gym, as having the knowledge of what nutrition needs to be done to maximise muscle growth will be key in dictating the level of success the training program has. By having time with the students in the classroom, we're also able to educate them on the other aspects of health, which can be taken on into later life and used beneficially to keep healthy. The NHS state that eating enough protein not only helps build muscle, but also helps to keep blood glucose stable. Understandably, not everyone will stick to the training program as rigorously as wanted, whether that be because of environmental constraints such as not enough time to go to the gym because of work, or simply because of a lack of drive. However, delivering this knowledge can be an added motivator for students to eat healthier food, even if it's not for the purpose of the training program. Within the program, it's imperative that the environmental constraint of how fast an individual can grow muscle is considered. And Alton found that the rate of muscle growth can be affected by our genes. These findings are important as the students need to understand that they will not all develop at the same rate, as not to lose motivation seeing others progress at a quicker rate. When in a calorie surplus, students will also be susceptible to gaining fat, especially if, as Thorsby found, they have genetics that make them prone to gaining it and or a slow metabolism. This knowledge is key to students as they can adapt their training programs and counteract the influence of their genetics. If, for example, a student is putting on a substantial amount of fat compared to muscle when training a calorie surplus, they may need to go on a calorie deficit to lose any unwanted fat. Opposing to a calorie surplus, calorie deficit is a method in which individuals consume less calories than they use, just as finer states. It needs to be understood, though, that when in a deficit, as Alexandrov et al. Suggests, total protein intake may be important when preserving muscle mass in a calorie deficit. Castle found that the recommended daily allowance for protein is 4 to 6 grams for teenage girls and 52 grams for teenage boys per day. It is crucial, though, that if a student does decide to go into a calorie deficit on the program, that is monitored to make sure enough is still being eaten to ensure the student's health and safety. Partaking either a calorie deficit or surplus, an individual, of course, must know how many calories they're consuming. The easiest way of doing this is calorie counting. To know how many calories need to be consumed in a surplus or deficit, the students will have to work out their daily recommended calorie intake. There are various free websites online that make it easy for them to calculate this. Once this is calculated, Davis et al. Says that there are a plethora of apps available on the App Store that can tell you how many calories are in your foods. It does have to be considered, however, that a constraint may whether students have access to smartphones or not in order to use them. It also needs to be considered that when educating students about calorie counting, Simpson reports that calorie counting apps have the ability to trigger, maintain, or even exacerbate eating disorder symptomology. Of course, it's done in research, but research from Schaumburg found that calorie counting is not body satisfaction, but other uses for keeping healthy. These two contrasting reports suggest that it's the way in which people are educated on calorie counting that dictates if it's a positive or negative tool. By educating the students in a certain way, where they view calorie counting as a beneficiary to keep healthy instead of one to build a hegemonically ideal body, not only will it be more likely the successfulness of the training program will go up, but the likelihood of maintaining healthiness post-education may increase too. According to the NHS guide on physical activity, children and young people need to do 2 types of physical activity each week: aerobic exercise and exercise to strengthen their muscles and bones. Children and young people aged 5 to 18 should therefore aim for an average of at least 60 minutes of moderate or vigorous intensity a day across the week. They are also required to take part in a variety of types and intensities of physical activity across the week to develop movement skills, muscles and bones. Therefore, cardiovascular training will be implemented in our programme at least once a week. Students will be taught the benefits of cardiovascular training in theory classes before carrying out HIIT training, provided that you supplement your body with enough high-quality protein, complex carbohydrates, and essential fats while giving your muscles time to recover. Regular cardio workouts can result in a positive effect on your muscle building, as Nat Mesnick found. These benefits include capillary growth, increase within the muscles, improving circulation, the speed in which oxygen and nutrients are transported and metabolic waste removed, and increasing stamina and recovery time, allowing students to work out at higher intensities and more often, while also promoting a decrease in body fat. It can be broken down into 2 main categories: sprint interval training and high intensity training. Golding deciphers between the two, stating that sprint interval training is a form of very intense interval training that should only be performed by already well-conditioned people who have no contrary health conditions. You perform 3 to 5 intervals of very short maximal intensity exercise working until you can't sustain intensity, followed by a prolonged recovery period. This would typically be 20 to 30 seconds of work followed by a 3 to 5 minute rest interval. Due to the recommended requirements from Golding, participants will only be subjected to this level of training later on in the programme, a challenge to those excelling students. However, it is much more appropriate to the general public or average gym goer. This involves work periods ranging from 30 seconds to 3 minutes, working between 80 to 100% of your maximum heart rate with short recovery periods than sit. Golding also recommends that your recovery period should be at least the same as your work interval and can become shorter if you get fitter. During the students' theory sessions, they will use heart rate monitors in pairs to work out what their resting and working heart rate is, as well as their maximum heart rate zone, which is important when participating in cardiovascular training and may be useful in later life. The traditional method for establishing maximum heart rate is to manage a range of 220 before multiplying it by 0.8 to figure out what 80% of it is. So when we apply this to an average 16-year-old, we find that the maximum heart rate zone will be between 163.2 and 204 beats a minute, which is what Tanaka also suggests that students will be able to learn from the Carbonian formula, said to be more accurate. Now, as I aforementioned, having a balanced diet when building muscle mass is essential, and students need to know what the recommended amounts of each category to acquire one. When trying to build muscle, the student's minimum protein intake each day should roughly be 150 grams depending on weight. They would likely be better served by eating 180 to 220 grams per day. It's important to note that they are trying to repair and build muscle tissue, but their body is still growing. For these reasons, students need to learn not to get too close to the 150 gram minimum. When it comes to building muscle, it's better to eat a little more protein than a little less. Students will create a safe nutrition plan in and out of classroom that coincides with their training plan. They aim to get about 1 gram of protein each day for each gram that they weigh, I've said. And a lack of protein, calories, and other nutrients may also manufacture teen low growth, as stated on EMA Teen Health. Understanding of what the students already know about a balanced diet, we are implementing cooking classes. First, students will bring contents from their fridge at home and hand them in anonymously. Then the class will look through the ingredients and decipher what food group they belong to, whether this is appropriate in a balanced diet, and learn roughly how much their daily intake will be. An example could be margarine or baked goods such as crackers. Students would hopefully categorise these as trans fats and learn that they are manufactured fats that have been shown to raise bad cholesterol levels while lowering good cholesterol levels, as Shaw found. Research reveals that when you train a body part, protein synthesis remains elevated generally no longer than 48 hours, and in most cases it's elevated approximately 36 hours, after which it returns to baseline level. Instead of bombing a muscle group each day with endless volume, you're better off targeting muscle groups several times per week with a small amount of volume per day. By training a muscle group 2 to 3 times per week with a more moderate volume, you'll experience a greater degree of weekly protein synthesis per muscle group. As a result, Shaw found that these give you more optimal gains. As we know, the carbohydrate is the primary source of energy for our day-to-day tasks. For example, if you need 2,000 calories of energy per day and you're providing 50 to 75% of energy through carbs, then your body will remain in an anabolic state. However, if you have a carb intake that is less, say, than 20 to 30%, then your body will use protein and fat as the prime energy source to compensate, what Rydnick found. Instead, the protein that was meant for building muscle is now being used as an energy source, which is not ideal. Protein is more expensive than carbs. In extreme cases, Rydnick states that if the carb intake is even lower, then after using the protein in your food, your body will start breaking down your muscles for energy. So for building muscles, our students have to consume the amount of carbs that will satisfy their energy need and refill muscle glycogen levels. And the energy consumption of every individual is different. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Here is our reference list.